Good morning, interweb. Last time we looked at some of the things person markers can do. In this video, let's delve a little deeper, shall we? Impersonal person markers are forms that refer to people or groups in general. Think one in English. One needs to exercise regularly. You don't need an impersonal person marker in your language. You could just get by with regular noun phrases. People need to exercise regularly. But if you do want impersonalization as a feature, you have several options. Option 1. Take the person markers you already have and just use them impersonally. We routinely lie. We here means people in general. Money can't buy you love. You here means people in general. They don't allow pets. They equals a group in general. Cross-linguistically, plural person markers are most likely to get used impersonally, with the third person plural being the most likely. Outside of Europe, the impersonal use of the first and second person non-singular is not very common. Option 2 is to create a distinct impersonal form. Again, think one in English. A good idea here would be to derive your impersonal forms from words relating to people or groups. Cha meek, one is sick. Chano is man. Cha is one. And option 3 is where a change in marking indicates impersonalization. Like, say your language is a pro-drop language. Perhaps the dropping of the independent marker creates an impersonal meaning. Sa Juana, independent person marker, they walk. Juana, no independent person marker, one walks. You could encode tense aspect and mood information in your person markers. This kind of thing happens a lot in African languages. The main mechanism that achieves this is the fusion of the subject person markers with preceding auxiliary verbs. It'd be kind of like if English's future auxiliary contractions, I'll go, you'd go, etc., were fully grammaticalized into distinct, fixed person marker sets. I'll go, first person future, I will go. Polarity in linguistics refers to positive and negative statements. I am sick versus I am not sick. You could encode polarity in your person marker paradigms by having one set of person markers for positive utterances and another for negative utterances. Ma meek, positive person marker, I was sick. No mratok me, negative person marker, I was not sick. In theory, you could extend this idea to include conditional utterances, for example. Ya meek, conditional person marker, I might have been sick. Person markers, particularly the third person, can be used anaphorically or deictically. An anaphoric person marker is one that refers back to and gets its meaning from an earlier noun phrase. John is nice, he is nice. He here is anaphoric as it refers back to John. A deictic person marker does not refer back to an earlier noun phrase, so its meaning is entirely dependent on context. He is nice, speaker pointing at John. You could do what English does and use the same set of person markers in both contexts, or you could restrict person markers to anaphoric contexts and use demonstratives in deictic contexts. John is here, he is nice, anaphoric context, person marker. That is nice, pointing at John, deictic context, demonstrative. Or you could invent two sets of person markers, one for each context. John is here, he is nice, M is nice. Logophorosity is a thing similar to the concept of obviation, which we discussed in the previous video. It marks a sort of shift in point of view. She said that she stopped over in Dubai versus she said that she stopped over in Dubai. Both she's refer to the same person here, but to different people here. That is, the POV is different in the latter half of this statement. Languages that feature logophorosity will tend to have an ordinary set of person markers for these and a distinct logophoric set of person markers to clear up the ambiguity here. She said that she stopped over in Dubai. She said that Z stopped over in Dubai. The interesting thing here is that the choice of logophoric person markers isn't always used to distinguish different POVs. They can indicate a speaker's willingness to take responsibility for the veracity of a reported event. In the first statement, the speaker's use of the ordinary person markers implies that they implicitly approve of the reported event. She said that she stopped over in Dubai, and I have no reason to doubt this. Whereas in the second statement, the speaker's use of the logophoric person marker implies that they are somewhat more doubtful. She said that she stopped over in Dubai, but I think she might be wrong about that. A related idea is the use of LDRs, long distance reflexives. Think something similar to the word self in English. These two Japanese statements, on the face of it, mean the same thing. Yamada ended up marrying a woman who hated him. The only difference between the two statements is the use of an ordinary person marker, kare, in the first, and jibun, self, in the second. And yes, I have mispronounced everything here. Apologies, Japan. In the first, the speaker gives an objective description of what happened by placing themselves at a distance from Yamada. In the second, the speaker identifies themselves with Yamada through the use of the LDR, which implies that Yamada knew at the time of marriage the woman he married hated him. In the first, the POV is that of the speaker assessing the situation from outside. In the second, the POV is that of Yamada. Emphatic person markers are used to create contrast, counter-expectation, and/or intensification. You could have an ordinary set of person markers and an emphatic set. English kinda does this with its self paradigm. He built it himself, emphasis on the fact that he built it. If your Conlang has independent and dependent person forms, the independent set may be classed as emphatic and the dependent set as non-emphatic. See Kukui Hano, independent form, he builds a house, emphasis on he. Kukui Hano, dependent form only, he builds a house, no emphasis. Alternatively, reduplication of all or part of a non-emphatic form can be used to create emphasis, contrast, intensification, etc. See Kukui Hano, he builds a house, no emphasis. Sisi Kukui Hano, reduplication, he builds a house, emphasis on he. You can even throw in an emphatic particle to really drive home the idea. Sisi Pa Kukui Hano, reduplication plus emphatic marker, he builds a house, strong emphasis on he. And you could also create splits, perhaps a person-based split. Something like no emphatic person marker in the first and second person, distinct emphatic marker in the third. Ma Koko Yo Hano, I build a house, emphasis is created through periphrasis. Sisi Kukui Hano, he builds a house, emphasis created through emphatic person marker. Let's talk about agreement and person marking. You know, like how in English when you use a third person marker, the verb gets modified. She walks. Broadly speaking, there are three types of agreement pattern available to use: syntactic, ambiguous, and pronominal. Syntactic agreement is where a person agreement marker cannot occur without an overt local controller. Basically, English. He walks home is grammatical, walks home is not. Pronominal agreement is just the opposite. Walks home would be grammatical, he walks home would not be. That is, the person agreement marker cannot be present if its controller is present in the same construction. Ambiguous agreement is a mixture of both syntactic and pronominal agreement. The person agreement marker may occur with or without its controller. So both he walks home and walks home will both be grammatical. If there is a local controller, we call it grammatical agreement. If there isn't a local controller, we call it anaphoric agreement. Once you decide on the type of agreement you want, assuming you do want agreement, you can then decide which grammatical persons trigger the agreement. You can kind of do what you want here, but the most common strategy is to have agreement involving all three persons. I walka, you walkie, he, she, it walks. English's present tense third person only agreement system is actually a bit of a weird outlier cross-linguistically. You could have an animacy based agreement system, perhaps animate persons trigger agreement and inanimate ones don't. Or maybe a humanist based system. Person markers referring to humans trigger agreement, those referring to non-humans don't. Next, you can decide which parts of speech get the agreement. Common targets here are verbs, adjectives, nouns, or locational adverbials. At a bare minimum, you'll want to mark person agreement on your verbs. This is by far the most common strategy, cross-linguistically. He walks home. But you could also mark person agreement on verbs and adjectives, particularly adjectives that express a property or quality. He walks home, he is strongs. Or agreement on verbs, adjectives, and nouns. He walks home, he is strongs, he is a soldier's. Or on all four, albeit this is the least common strategy. He walks home, he is strongs, he is a soldier's, he is at home's. In fact, of all the possible combinations, only these three appear not to be present cross-linguistically. So perhaps something to explore in a Conlang. Oh, and if you do mark agreement on more than the verb, it's fairly common to have one set of agreement markers for the verb and another for all other targets. He walks home, he is stronga, he is a soldiera, he is at homa. So you're going to need to check out my video on morphosyntactic alignment, otherwise literally none of this bit is going to make any sense whatsoever. Assuming you've done that, morphosyntactic alignment affects person markers, as per this chart. Accusative alignment in both independent and dependent forms is the most common strategy, but any combination of the top 5 most popular strategies would work and be fairly naturalistic. Like many Australian languages favour ergative alignment for independent person markers and accusative alignment for dependent person markers. And as always, you can create splits. Person-based splits are a thing, the most common being accusative in the first and second person and ergative in the third. I slept, I loved you. First and second persons are used here, so accusative alignment. She slept, her loved she. Third person is used, so ergative alignment. You could also create splits based on number. Maybe non-singular person markers get one alignment and singular person markers get a different alignment. We slept, us loved they. Non-singular person markers, ergative alignment. She slept, she loved her. Singular person markers, accusative alignment. And although I'm not sure if NatLangs do this, you could explore the possibility of humanness and animacy based splits. She slept, she loved her. She and her refer to humans, so accusative alignment. She slept, her loved she. Her and she refer to non-humans, ergative alignment. So possession in English is fairly boring. We have our possessive pronouns, and we tack them on to any and all nouns. Other languages get a bit more nuanced. They recognise that a father and a goat are in fact not the same thing. Possession of a father is inalienable, and possession of a goat is alienable. That is to say, inalienable nouns are those where the owner of the noun has a stable, long-term relationship with said noun and exerts little to no control over it. So like you have a stable relationship with a father, you don't gain or lose biological fathers over time, and you don't control who your father is. So father is an inalienable noun. Alienable nouns are those where the owner of a noun may have an unstable relationship with it over time and may exert control over it. You can buy or sell goats over time, and you have control over which goats you own. So goat here is an alienable noun. Now, what nouns are considered inalienable and alienable differs from language to language, so there's lots of interpretive freedom available to us here. Anyways, the simplest way of encoding this distinction in your person paradigms is to have a separate set of possessional person markers for each. Aki pakoa, inalienable marker, my father. Ki hoa, alienable marker, my goat. Or alternatively, you could have one set of possessive person markers, but vary the agreement depending on whether the possessed noun is alienable or inalienable. You have 3 options here. No agreement whatsoever. Ki pakoa, possessive person marker, my father. Ki hoa, possessive person marker, my goat. Inalienable agreement only. Ki pakoai, my father. Inalienable noun, so agreement is triggered. Ki hoa, my goat. Alienable noun, so no agreement is triggered. Or you could have agreement in both. Ki pakoai, my father. Inalienable noun, so agreement is triggered. Ki hoanna, my goat. Alienable noun, so a different agreement is triggered. I've included an alienable suffix n here to separate the person agreement and the noun. This is fairly common in systems like these. The inalienable person agreement tends to be close to the thing possessed, whereas the alienable person agreement tends to be further away. Also, these categories, particularly alienable possession, can be further subdivided. Perhaps your language subdivides alienable nouns into natural and man-made nouns, with each getting its own set of possession markers and/or agreement schemes. And like with most things to do with person markers, you can go as simple or as complex as you want here. The Anadu is real. Person markers can also be used to encode the social relationship between the first, second, and third person in a conversation. Here's some ideas very loosely based on what we see in some NatLangs. Imagine we have a society that divides itself up into 2 broad social groups. We could have one set of person markers for in-group communication and another for cross-group communication. Ma loak ta, I heard you. In-group person markers used, so the speaker and the dressee belong to the same social group. Mo loak to, I heard you. Out-group person markers used, so speaker and addressee are of different social groups. Or you could say that one group uses one set of person markers exclusively, and the other group uses the other set exclusively. Ira I ta, hello. Speaker uses ta, so therefore they're a member of group A, say. Ira I to, hello. Speaker uses to, so they're a member of the other group, group B. Person markers may also be used to encode generational information. You could have one set of person markers for same generation level communication, between a brother and sister for example, and another for cross-generation communication, between a mother and son, say. Ma loak ta, I heard you. Same generation markers used, so this would be brother and sister talking for example. Ni loakta, I heard you. Different generation markers used, so this would be mother and son talking, for example. Another idea would be to encode blood relationships versus relationships created by marriage. Blood relatives could use one set of person markers, marital relatives could use another. Ma loakta, I heard you. Blood relative person marker set used, so this would be father and a grandchild talking, for example. Nim loakdam, I heard you. The in-law person marker set used, so this could be a groom talking to the father of a bride, say. Basically, any social relationships your con culture values can be encoded in your person marker paradigms, and multiple categories may be combined to create a bewildering array of complex person paradigms. Like in Kuyani, both generational level and membership in a given moiety, a kind of social group, are encoded using no less than 12 different sets of person markers. Another key relationship encoded on person markers is that of deference, formality, politeness, etc. As with the last section, things get complicated here, but in its most basic form, the idea is to have an ordinary set of person markers and an additional, more formal, polite, deferential set. European languages like to limit this distinction to the second person. This is known as the TV distinction, named after the comparable Latin person markers tu and vos. And I've probably mispronounced the Latin there, to be fair. Oftentimes, the formal set is created via a change of person and or number. Non-singular forms are generally considered markers of greater social distance, status or respect than singular numbers, using the first person plural, second person plural, third person singular, and third person plural are all attested options here. And if you have multiple levels of politeness, the third person is usually associated with the highest level of deference. Also, it's worth noting that there's nothing stopping you from having polite versions of the third and first person, used to respectfully refer to a person being talked about and to humbly refer to oneself. Avoidance of person markers is another strategy to mark politeness. You could go with zero forms. Would you like anything else will become would like anything else. Impersonal forms, would one like anything else. Full names, would Mr. Smith like anything else. Titles, would King like anything else. And or kinship terms, would grandfather, grandmother like anything else. In this case, grandfather or grandmother wouldn't mean your grandfather or grandmother. Rather, the indication would be that you respect the addressee by associating them with people of seniority and wisdom. Languages of the Indian subcontinent go a different route, preferring to use reflexives to indicate polite speech. Something kinda like you are great versus you yourself are great. Some languages opt instead for systems of honorifics. Good examples here are Javanese, Classical Tibetan, Korean and Thai, all of which are pretty complex and involved, so for the sake of simplicity, let's look at what Nepali does. Nepali has 5 levels of respect in the second person and 3 in the third. FYI, the form used to address a member of the royal family comes from a noun meaning government, and these two are demonstratives. Now, all of this is applied based on caste and age. So a Brahmin speaking to a senior Brahmin would use Yaha, but a Brahmin speaking to a junior Sudras would use Ta. And again, apologies to the fine people of Nepal for utterly butchering your language. So by extrapolation then, to create a basic honorific system, one could start by choosing a number of respect levels, derive the forms used from nouns of respect and demonstratives, and then figure out how they are to be applied. You know, based on rank, status, office, age, formality, intimacy, social groups, and so on. Or any combination of those. Oh, and before I go, it would be remiss of me not to mention, oh boy, Sochiapamchinantec? Yeah, let's go with that. It features 2 levels of respect in its second person forms, neutral versus familiar, so far so boring, but in its first person forms, it not only encodes politeness, but also the emotional attitude of the speaker towards the addressee. How cool is that? Perhaps something to explore further in a Conlang. Anyways, you're probably sick of hearing me talking at this stage, so cue end screen. Laters. Good morning, Interweb. Just a heads up, r/Conlangs is running a showcase, and I'm pretty sure it'll appeal to quite a lot of people here. Links are in all the usual places. The basic idea here is that it's open to any and all Conlangers. All you have to do is submit an audio portion of your Conlang before the end of January 2021, and you'll be in with a shout of getting into r/Conlangs showcase video. If that sounds like your bag, again, Links are in the usual places. Also, a massive thanks goes out to all the patrons who helped make Artifexian a possibility. In particular, Johan Spaedtke, Spencer Brownlee, Terrablae, Alexander Roper, Andrew P Chehayl, John Hooyer, Ripta Pasay, and World Anvil. So to you and to all the other patrons and to everyone watching, I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Relax, enjoy yourself, stay safe, and I will see you all very soon in 2021. Until next time, Edgar out.